High above the North Sea, a dark twin-engine silhouette drops out of the sun, its long nose and tight canopy cutting a lean, predatory outline over the lead boxes of B-17s. The pilot settles behind the formation, knowing they can see his ME-410. They're about to find out he's had an upgrade. He fires once. A violent crack slams through the cockpit, rocking the aircraft as if it struck a wall. Ahead, a fortress bursts open at the wing root, fire trailing past its tail. The nearest bombers jolt apart. The formation starts breaking up, suspecting flak fire, while gunners stare back at him, dumbfounded. The ME-410 lines up for another shot, applying deliberate, careful pressure. His gun is slow, 1 round a second, but at 4 pounds each, 1 is enough to make it sting. Before World War II, the Luftwaffe believed it had discovered the key to winning control of the skies. German air planners were convinced that small, agile fighters would not decide future wars, but that aircraft with greater speed, range, and firepower would. As such, they began advocating for machines that could dominate through strength rather than maneuver. The concept was called Zerstörer, meaning destroyer. It described a heavy, twin-engine fighter designed to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, shoot down defending aircraft, and strike ground targets on its own. Its origins lay in the early years of Germany's rearmament, when it was rebuilding its air power in secret. The Treaty of Versailles had banned the country from maintaining a military air force, so civilian programs were used as cover to train pilots, test new engines, and experiment with modern airframes. Under this disguise, a new generation of Luftwaffe officers began shaping a doctrine built around fast, heavily armed aircraft. Across the world, the biplanes of the previous war were being replaced by sleek, all-metal monoplanes with enclosed cockpits and retractable landing gear. By the mid-1930s, several major powers were beginning to explore the concept of the heavy fighter. These aircraft promised to be fast enough to chase down bombers, tough enough to withstand damage, and powerful enough to fight alone deep behind enemy lines. Britain's Bristol Beaufighter, Japan's Ki-45, America's P-38 Lightning, and France's Potez 630 all followed the same philosophy: more engines, more guns, more range. However, the design carried a fundamental flaw. Heavy fighters were large and cumbersome. They were fast in a straight line, but once in combat, their weight turned against them. Germany's task was to get the reach and firepower it wanted from a twin-engine fighter, without losing control when combat closed in. As such, they refused to abandon the Zerstörer dream. The Luftwaffe saw it as a key part of its early air plans, intended to support its fast, aggressive style of warfare. As a result, by the outbreak of war, this belief had shaped the entire force. Out of roughly 4,200 operational aircraft, about 788 were single-engine fighters, while 431 were heavy twin-engine Zerstörers. More than 10% of Germany's combat force was built around the assumption that range and firepower mattered more than maneuverability. Germany's first step toward realizing this vision was the Messerschmitt Bf-110, a sleek twin-engine fighter built to embody the Zerstörer ideal. After several design revisions, it entered service in 1939 as a fast, long-range aircraft, heavily armed and capable of escorting bombers deep into enemy airspace. It carried machine guns and cannons in its nose, could stay aloft for hours, and packed enough firepower to tear through almost anything in its path. In the early campaigns, it performed as promised. Over Poland, Norway, and France, the Bf-110 dominated skies where the Luftwaffe already held control, outclassing weaker opponents and proving its worth as a bomber escort and strike aircraft. For a brief moment, it seemed the Zerstörer had fulfilled its promise. That illusion was shattered in the summer of 1940 during the Battle of Britain. The Bf-110 struggled against the RAF's nimble Spitfires and Hurricanes, especially once fights tightened at close range. Once its Bf-109 escorts broke away to dogfight, the 110s were left exposed. Allied pilots soon learned to target them first, knowing they couldn't escape. As historian Martin Windrow described it, they were, quote, easily identifiable from long distances. Its acceleration and speed were insufficient to allow it the luxury of avoiding combat. It was sluggish in evasive maneuvers, its turning circle was wide, and with its large wing and tail surfaces, it presented a good target. The destroyer became the destroyed. The Luftwaffe's pride was in ruins. Squadrons returned severely depleted, their formations broken apart. Yet, instead of scrapping the concept, the Air Ministry tightened the requirements. Any successor would need the Bf-110's range and firepower, but with steadier handling, better control at speed, and fewer compromises once a fight tightened. Willy Messerschmitt, never one to look back, decided not to simply improve on what already existed, but to build an entirely new aircraft from the ground up. The result was the Me-210, which was supposed to finally prove the Luftwaffe's heavy fighter concept right. Like its predecessor, it was a twin-engine aircraft built for multiple roles. Still, instead of redemption, it became one of the Luftwaffe's most significant failures. In reality, Messerschmitt had begun developing the Me-210 as early as 1938, just as the Bf-110 was entering service. He presented the Me-210 as a new design that built on the 110's foundation but promised significant improvements in speed, range, and versatility. The aircraft had a crew of 2, pilot and gunner, seated in tandem beneath a greenhouse-style canopy. Though it reused many components from the Bf-110, its nose was shorter, shifting its center of gravity and improving handling. It introduced an internal bomb bay, newly shaped wings for greater speed, and an ambitious remote-controlled defensive system, mounting twin 13mm MG-131 machine guns. These barbettes offered a wide field of fire without the risk of hitting the tail. Forward firepower came from 2 20mm MG-151 cannons and 2 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns, making it a formidable opponent on paper. Ideally, it would represent a technological leap forward, capable of reaching 620 kilometers per hour and carrying a 2,200 kilogram bomb load. However, in the air, it proved extremely unstable. Radio operator and gunner Luther Harta later recalled, quote, "There were many accidents as we were getting trained to fly the 210. The plane would just suddenly drop out of the sky. Our casualties in training were as bad as when we were in Russia." Despite mounting warnings from test pilots about dangerous instability, political pressure pushed the project forward, and by 1941, the Me-210 had been cleared for mass production before testing was even finished. Behind those critical flaws lay a storm of pride, pressure, and ego that turned Germany's most promising aircraft designer into his own worst enemy. At the center stood Willy Messerschmitt, the brilliant but stubborn engineer who'd risen to fame with the Bf-109, the Luftwaffe's most successful fighter. He knew the power his name carried in Germany's aviation world. When the Me-210's problems started to surface, Messerschmitt refused to concede defeat. Instead, he clashed fiercely with the Reich Air Ministry, insisting the design was sound and only needed more development time. Berlin wanted quick results. The war was intensifying, and patience was running out. Inside the ministry, political infighting consumed the project. Generals demanded a new heavy fighter immediately. Engineers pleaded for redesigns. Hermann Göring, focused on maintaining production figures and morale, refused to halt manufacturing, even as reports of crashes poured in. As a result, factories built roughly 350 to 400 Me-210s between late 1941 and mid-1943 before production finally stopped. When the crashes began, the finger-pointing started. Pilots were accused of cowardice, engineers of incompetence, and factory workers of sabotage. Messerschmitt blamed the Air Ministry for rushing him. The ministry blamed Messerschmitt for arrogance. By then, the Me-210 had become so entrenched in budgets and planning that abandoning it seemed impossible. Money, contracts, and reputations were already tied to it, and the Luftwaffe couldn't afford the embarrassment of cancellation. The program staggered on, sustained by pride alone. Messerschmitt's engineers worked frantically to tame the aircraft's handling problems, either by lengthening the fuselage, reshaping the tail, or running test after test. Still, the flaws refused to disappear, and the dream of a perfect Zerstörer drifted farther away. Their efforts produced an interim design, the Me-310, incorporating a series of aerodynamic and structural improvements. Yet even this version failed to solve the core problem, and the project was quietly abandoned before it could enter production. Frustrated, the team decided to take the existing Me-210 airframe, merge it with the Me-310's upgrades, and incorporate a long list of additional modifications. Piece by piece, They rebuilt the failed design, stretching its airframe, rebalancing its center of gravity, and finally producing a machine worthy of flight. The result was the Me-410 Hornisse, or Hornet. At first glance, the Me-410 appeared to be little more than a refined Me-210, sharing its long nose, twin engines, and smooth lines. However, it was practically a new aircraft. Measuring 12.48 meters long, 16.35 meters wide, and 4.28 meters tall, it was only slightly larger than its predecessor in every dimension. Still, those fractions of a meter made all the difference. The most critical transformation came from the wings. The Me-210 used a split leading-edge design, with 6 degrees of sweep on the inner section and 12.6 degrees on the outer section, separated by the engine nacelles. This uneven geometry produced turbulent airflow, making the 210 notoriously unstable. The Me-410 corrected this flaw by giving both wing sections a uniform 5.5 degree sweep, resulting in smoother airflow and far greater stability. Automatic leading-edge slats were also added, enabling safer low-speed maneuvers and tighter turns, while the fuselage was slightly lengthened to improve balance. Furthermore, the tail assembly was reinforced, and its control surfaces were refined to improve handling predictability. Powering this redesigned airframe were 2 Daimler-Benz DB603A inverted V12 engines, each producing 1,750 horsepower, marking a significant upgrade from the DB605s of the Me-210. With this new power, the Hornet could reach 624 kilometers per hour, climb faster, and achieve a service ceiling near 10,000 meters, with a combat range of around 1,400 kilometers. For the first time, Germany's heavy fighter concept handled precisely as engineers intended. It was steady, fast, and precise. The standard Hornet configuration mounted 4 20mm MG-151 cannons and 2 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns in the nose, along with 2 13mm MG-131s and remote-controlled barbettes for rear defense. 2 of the 20mm cannons were housed in the internal bomb bay, giving the Hornet a powerful head-on punch. The same bomb bay could carry 2 500-kilogram fragmentation bombs, though the larger high-explosive SC-500s forced crews to fly with the bay doors slightly open, reducing speed and limiting payload to about 250 kilograms per bay. The Me-410's modular design allowed it to be quickly adapted for different missions. The U-1 variant carried reconnaissance cameras, while the U-2 configuration added 20mm cannons for heavier firepower. Other field kits allowed for rocket launchers, bombs, or specialized equipment, depending on the mission. Its first test flight in March 1942 proved the design consistently stable, and by early 1943, the first operational aircraft were in the Luftwaffe's hands. The Hornet entered service as a night interceptor, a role where many heavy fighters previously found success. Soon after, it was assigned to Geschwader 1 and Geschwader 26, which was thrown into combat in the spring of 1943, just as the daylight air war over Germany intensified. The U.S. 8th Air Force was striking deeper with every raid, with rows of B-17s and B-24s hammering shipyards, factories, and rail lines across northern Germany. The Me-410 Hornet arrived as Germany's new hope, armed to break into bomber formations that conventional fighters could barely reach. At dawn on May 13th, radar stations along the northern coast picked up waves of bombers crossing the Frisian Islands, heading toward Kiel and Wilhelmshaven. An armada of fortress-like aircraft moved under light escort as the P-47 Thunderbolts guarding them lacked the range to follow deep into Germany, leaving the bombers largely exposed. The Luftwaffe scrambled everything still able to fly. From scattered airfields, engines roared to life as Bf-109s, FW-190s, and the newly operational Me-410s clawed into the sky. Their twin Daimler-Benz DB603A engines growled through the clouds as they climbed toward interception altitude. Inside the cramped cockpits, pilots fixed their sights on the oncoming bomber stream, while gunners prepared the heavy 30mm cannons. When the formations finally came into range, the German interceptors struck from high astern, unleashing bursts that tore through aluminum and fuel lines. B-17s peeled away, trailing fire as the formation began to break apart. Within minutes, the air above the North Sea became a storm of contrails and tracer fire, damaged aircraft tumbling through the clouds. Some bombers were forced out of formation, others limped home riddled with holes, their tight formations shattered, but not destroyed. From the ground, German gunners and civilians could see the spectacle unfolding above them as the Reich's newest weapon was finally in action. The Luftwaffe's propaganda machine seized the moment, hailing the Me-410 as the new bomber killer. Even the Führer was mesmerized by the Hornet's early success. He was sure it could keep Allied forces at bay, declaring it, quote, the backbone of the home air defense. As Allied bombing intensified in 1943, Me-410s were reconfigured as fast bombers for low-level strikes and reprisal raids over Britain. Their speed, range, and precision made them among the few Luftwaffe aircraft still capable of hitting back. Yet while the Hornet struck outward, the air war was already turning against Germany. The U.S. 8th Air Force's raids grew larger, the formations tighter, and the bombers now flew under constant escort. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings pushed deeper into the Reich, eroding the Hornet's advantage. For a few months, the Me-410 could still strike from a distance, using its heavy cannons to break into bomber streams before the fighters arrived. However, by early 1944, the equation changed again, with the arrival of a new predator, the P-51 Mustang. With its long range, blistering speed, and high agility, the Mustang followed bombers all the way to Berlin and back, erasing the Hornet's standoff advantage. Luftwaffe crews tried to adapt, flying tight formations and attacking from long range before diving away. Still, the Mustangs were too fast. They came from above and behind, slicing through the Hornets before gunners could even aim. Each interception became a punishing ordeal. The bomber streams bristled with guns, their tracers forming walls of fire that Me-410 crews had to fly straight into, knowing that one burst too late meant they wouldn't return. By spring 1944, the Me-410's role had dwindled to a few desperate Reich defense units, mainly ZG-26 and ZG-76, tasked with intercepting American bombers. Speed no longer mattered. Firepower couldn't save them. Entire Zastoro units were worn down within weeks, and instead of giving up, Germany once again doubled down. The High Command clung to the belief that if agility couldn't win the skies, maybe overwhelming firepower could. They took the Me-410, already one of the heaviest fighters in the air, and gave it a weapon that defied logic. In its nose, they mounted the BK-5, a 50mm cannon adapted from the Panzer III tank. The new variant, the Me-410 B2U4, was the Luftwaffe's most extreme experiment in aerial firepower. The gun extended almost 2 meters past the aircraft's nose. Pilots often complained that firing the massive gun felt as if the aircraft froze in midair. The recoil was so strong, it seemed to stop the Me-410 in flight, throwing off aim and control with every shot. Each shell weighed nearly 2 kilograms and could tear through an American bomber with a single hit, igniting fuel tanks or snapping a wing clean off. With an effective range of 900 meters, crews could fire from beyond B-17's range. With only 21 rounds on board, every shot counted. When the gun hit, the results were significant. When it missed, the Me-410 was left heavy and exposed. The extra weight upset its balance, dulled its agility, and made evasive maneuvers nearly impossible. Reloading the weapon was slow and cumbersome. The heavy autoloader managed barely 1 round a second, an eternity in a sky filled with Mustangs and Thunderbolts. And yet, when it worked, it was strikingly effective. Crews from ZG-26 and 76, flying from bases in northern Germany, used the Me-410 B2U4 in desperate daylight intercepts against U.S. bomber streams during the spring of 1944. The heavy fighters climbed to altitude, engines straining under the extra weight of the 50mm gun and its ammunition. Once above the formations, they rolled into long, shallow dives, closing to roughly a kilometer before firing. A single shell could break open a flying fortress, ignite its fuel, and send it spiraling earthward in a trail of fire. Some American crews mistook the explosions for light flak, reporting bursts at fighter height. To them, it seemed as though anti-aircraft guns had risen into the clouds themselves. In early 1944, the Luftwaffe's second Geschwader 26, one of the last true bomber-destroyer wings, took the Me-410 B2U4 into combat. Armed with a 50mm cannon, they aimed to stop the American bomber streams from reaching the heart of Germany once and for all. From forward bases in northern Germany and the occupied Netherlands, the Me-410s climbed through the thin winter haze toward the distant glimmer of B-17s and B-24s, moving in precise, endless formations. Flying in pairs, the Hornets leveled off above the bombers, engines drumming evenly as they rolled into long, shallow dives. The first attack wave struck, unleashing their heavy cannon fire in sharp, surgical bursts. The air erupted in violent flashes as cannon shells punched through the opposing aircraft. Within seconds, the Me-410s broke away, climbing again into the sun, their wake marked by the fading glow of falling wreckage. Between February and mid-April 1944, 2nd ZG-26 claimed 133 bombers shot down, 129 B-17s and 4 B-24s, an astounding tally for such a small formation. Victory, however, came at a heavy price. 9 Me-410s were lost, many with their crews, brought down by P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings. Beyond ZG-26, other Me-410 wings, like 3rd ZG-26, ZG-76, KG-51, and scattered detachments, faced the same grim fate. Each mission cost more men, more fuel, and more machines than Germany could replace. By the summer of 1944, the airfields that had once swarmed with Hornets were nearly silent. Fuel shortages and Allied air supremacy had crippled the destroyer arm, leading maintenance crews to cannibalize wrecks for parts. After the Allied invasion of France, the few Me-410 stationed there became targets themselves, wrecked on the ground before they could even take off. Those that survived flew desperate night reconnaissance or low-level intruder sorties. A handful sent south for photo missions over Italy met the same end, intercepted in skies the Reich no longer controlled. On November 22, 1944, an Me-410A3, piloted by Oberlieutenant Lunanst of a reconnaissance unit, was returning from a photo mission when a navigation error brought him over Salerno, territory long in Allied hands. Believing he was approaching a friendly field, he lowered his landing gear and came in for a touchdown. As his Hornet's wheels hit the runway, startled gunners fired a few quick bursts before realizing the German plane wasn't attacking, but landing. When the shooting stopped, the Me-410 taxied to the end of the strip, its crew hurriedly swinging around for takeoff. By that point, escape was already impossible. A British 1,500-weight truck came racing down the runway, skidding to a stop across the fighter's path. One of the RAF officers leapt from the truck, pistol drawn, shouting for the Germans to halt. The gunner threw open his canopy and surrendered immediately. The pilot, panicked, kept the throttles open. The British officer climbed into the fuselage, held the pistol firmly against the pilot's shoulder, and ordered him to turn off the engines. The RAF had captured an Me-410 intact. The aircraft was shipped to England and delivered to the Air Fighting Development Unit at Farnborough for testing. There, British engineers and test pilots studied every inch of its airframe, engines, and weapons. No new aircraft came from these studies, but the intelligence proved invaluable. The remote-controlled gun barbettes especially drew attention, as they were considered ingenious in concept, though far too complex for practical use. The findings were circulated across RAF commands, instructing bomber crews on how to identify and evade the Hornet's long-range cannon attacks. For the Luftwaffe, it was another humiliation. Yet even as the Allies dissected the captured Hornet, German engineers kept trying to perfect it. They added more armor to protect the crew, heavier guns to strike from farther away, and extra fuel for longer missions. Each change made sense on paper, but together they burdened the Hornet, reducing the agility and balance that had once made it great. The A-Series was the first actual production model and the most recognizable. Its A3 reconnaissance variant carried extra cameras and a deeper fuselage packed with additional fuel. It served with long-range Verlaufklärungsgruppen on both the western and eastern fronts. The later B-Series refined the design, but added even more weight. The lightweight 7.92mm MG-17s were replaced with heavier 13mm MG-131 machine guns. Engineers had hoped to install the new 1900 horsepower DB603G engines, but shortages forced production to continue with the older DB603A. In theory, the new engines could have pushed the Hornet to 630 kilometers per hour, but the added mass narrowed the margin it once relied on. Specialized versions followed. The B-5 and B-6 were adapted for anti-shipping patrols, fitted with maritime radar, and sometimes equipped with torpedo mounts. Others traded defensive guns for extra fuel tanks to extend range. Engineers even proposed high-altitude variants, the C-Series, with longer wings and new supercharged engines, and the D-Series, which used wood in its outer panels to conserve aluminum. However, neither design reached full production. Glue shortages and rushed wartime construction left the wooden structures critically weak. And yet, the Me-410 kept being asked to carry more than it was built for. To the Luftwaffe's planners, the Me-410 was a chance to redeem a failed idea. They kept telling themselves the heavy fighter could still work, if only perfected. Even as the skies filled with Mustangs and Meteors, Berlin clung to the illusion that one more upgrade, one more weapon, could change the war's course. By the time the Luftwaffe realized that perfection no longer mattered, production was nearing its end. In August 1944, under the Jäger-Nutt program, the emergency fighter plan, the Me-410 was finally abandoned, a technical marvel built for a world that no longer existed. While Germany worked tirelessly to perfect the Me-410, the future of air combat was already sitting on a test runway. At airfields near Augsburg and Lechfeld, another machine waited, the Me-262 Schwalbe, the world's first operational jet fighter. Its twin UMO 004 turbojets howled, a sharp, metallic sound unlike anything heard before. When test pilots first took the aircraft aloft under full jet power, they said the acceleration felt unreal, as if the machine was pulling them into the future. The Schwalbe climbed faster and flew higher than anything else in the sky, reaching nearly 870 kilometers per hour. Its clean swept lines made the Me-410 look like something from another age. And yet, Germany's dwindling resources were tied up in salvaging the heavy fighter program. Commanders and planners still believed piston engines, not jets, would win the war. The Me-262's funding was cut, its engine work delayed, and its production buried under red tape. Even as test flights proved its potential, the jet languished. Instead, the Air Ministry ordered continued refinement of reliable aircraft like the Me-410. When Hitler finally demanded the Me-262 go into production, it was already too late. His insistence on turning it into a blitz bomber crippled its purpose as a fighter. By the time it entered combat in 1944, fuel shortages grounded half the fleet. The Allies already ruled the skies. Across Germany, incomplete airframes sat idle on factory floors, a testament to how far the Reich's ambitions had outrun its means. Meanwhile, the Me-410, the Luftwaffe's last great hope, had already become what it feared most, outpaced by the very future it helped usher in.